I sat on the couch watching the clock. 2:17 a.m. Jessica's business trip was over, and any minute now, she'd be walking through that door like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't been ignoring my calls all weekend. Like she hadn't sent one-word texts that felt colder than the empty side of our bed. Like she hadn't come back from her last trip looking different, relaxed, almost blissful. The headlights of her car finally cut through the darkness outside, illuminating the driveway. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, my hands clasped so tightly together that my knuckles ached. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement, her silhouette outlined in the dim glow of the street lamp. Her pace slowed, then stopped. She was looking at it. Right there, in the driveway, parked neatly beside my truck, was something she never expected to see. A sleek black sedan. Her lover's car. Jessica froze. Even from inside the house, I could see her body tense, her hand gripping the strap of her bag just a little too tightly. For the first time in what felt like months, I saw her mask crack. Not much. Just a flicker of something, panic, maybe, but enough. I stood up and walked to the door, opening it before she could pretend she hadn't seen anything. The porch light flickered above me, casting long shadows across the yard. She didn't move. "Jessica," I called out, my voice calm, steady, almost too steady. Still, she didn't come inside. She just stood there, staring at the car like if she looked at it long enough it would disappear. Like if she blinked, she'd wake up in a world where she wasn't about to be caught. I let the silence drag. Let it stretch between us until I saw her swallow hard, pulling herself together. Then finally she moved. Slowly, cautiously, like a deer sensing a trap but walking into it anyway. When she stepped inside, she smiled. The same bright, easy smile she used on clients, on strangers. Like she thought she could charm her way out of this. "Hey babe," she said, setting her bag down by the door. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "You're still up." I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "Long trip," she sighed, stretching like she was shaking off exhaustion. "God, you have no idea. I just want to shower and crash." I nodded toward the window. "That your coworker's car?" Her smile didn't falter. Not immediately, but there was a hesitation. A beat too long before she said, "What?" I stepped aside, letting her see the man standing in my living room. Tall, well-dressed, nervous. The moment her eyes landed on him, the color drained from her face. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be long gone, out of sight, out of reach. But I made sure that didn't happen. I had seen the signs, the little inconsistencies, the gaps in her stories. And this time, when she left for her business trip, I followed. I watched. I waited. And when she walked into that hotel with him, I didn't storm in. I didn't make a scene. No, I waited. I let them have their time. Let them enjoy whatever twisted fantasy they had built together. And then, when it was time for him to leave, I was there, waiting for him in the parking lot. We had a long conversation. Now he stood in my house, shifting uncomfortably, glancing between me and Jessica like a trapped animal. Jessica let out a small laugh, breathless, forced. "What is this?" I crossed my arms. "You tell me." Her eyes flickered to the man, then back to me. "I don't know what's going on here, but this is insane." She let out another laugh, shaking her head. "Why is he in our house?" "Our house," I repeated, arching a brow. "Funny. You didn't seem to care much about our house when you were sneaking off to hotel rooms with him." She scoffed. "Oh my God. Are you serious? You think I'm, cheating? That's insane." The man beside me shifted again, swallowing hard. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't saying anything. He just stood there, caught between the two of us, sweat gathering at his temple. Jessica turned to him, her smile tightening. "What did you tell him?" His mouth opened, then closed. No words came out. She let out a sharp breath and turned back to me. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this is ridiculous. I went on a business trip. I worked all weekend. And now I come home to, an interrogation. This is crazy." I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The video started playing instantly. Hotel lobby. Jessica. This man. Hands touching. Lips meeting. Her voice, soft, teasing. Telling him she had missed him so much. Jessica's face went pale. For the first time all night, she had nothing to say. I watched her reaction, letting the weight of the moment settle over us. Then I looked at the man standing beside me. "You should go," I told him. He didn't hesitate. He bolted for the door, practically tripping over himself in his rush to leave. Jessica didn't watch him go. She just stared at me, her mask slipping, something raw and real flashing behind her eyes before she shoved it down. Then finally she spoke. "You had no right to follow me." I almost laughed. Almost. But I didn't. I just stared at the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had lied to my face over and over again, and said the one thing I knew would cut deeper than anything else. "We're done." Jessica blinked. Once, twice, as if she didn't quite process what I had just said. Or maybe she had, and she was waiting for me to take it back. Her lips parted, and for the first time, she looked unsure. Good. She had spent months lying to me, sneaking around, treating me like an idiot. Now she was the one scrambling for control. "Wait," she said, her voice carefully measured. "You're saying we're done?" I didn't answer. I just watched her. Her jaw clenched, and something in her expression shifted. The uncertainty faded. In its place, something sharper took root. "Oh, come on," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Are we really doing this right now?" I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Jessica wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't apologizing. No, she was standing there, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "You don't just get to say, 'We're done' like that," she continued. "This is a marriage. People work through things." "Work through what, Jessica?" I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. "Your business trips? Your lies? The fact that you've been sleeping with someone else behind my back?" She rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. "Jesus, do you have to be so dramatic?" she muttered. "You act like I murdered someone." I stared at her. My fingers twitched at my side. This was the woman I had built a life with. The woman I had trusted. The woman who, even now, couldn't bring herself to admit what she had done. "Do you even feel bad?" I asked. Jessica sighed, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, like this conversation was inconvenient for her. "Of course I feel bad," she said. "But what do you want me to say? That I regret it? That it didn't mean anything? Because guess what? You won't believe me anyway." I tilted my head, studying her. "And would that be the truth?" She hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. I let out a slow breath. "That's what I thought." Jessica ran a hand through her hair, clearly frustrated. "Look, I made a mistake. Okay? People make mistakes. I don't see why you have to burn everything down over this." I let out a bitter laugh. "You don't see why?" Her eyes locked onto mine. "No, I don't." Something inside me snapped. Not in anger, not in sadness. Just finality. "You know what?" I said, taking a step back. "You're right. This conversation is pointless." Jessica blinked again, as if she hadn't expected me to give up so easily. I turned and walked toward the bedroom. "Where are you going?" she demanded. I didn't answer. I stepped into the room, grabbed the suitcase from the closet, and started packing. Behind me, Jessica let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Are you serious?" I tossed a handful of shirts into the suitcase. "Dead serious." She stormed into the room, standing just inside the doorway. "Oh, so that's it? You're just going to leave?" I zipped the suitcase and turned to face her. "No, you are," she faltered. "Excuse me, this house? It's mine. I paid for it. Your name isn't on the mortgage." I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and pulled up a message. "I already texted your sister. She's expecting you. You can pack your stuff tomorrow, but for tonight, you're leaving." Jessica stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find the right words. Then, just like that, the anger returned. "Oh, I see how it is," she snapped. "You think you can just throw me out like some problem you're done dealing with?" I leaned against the dresser, crossing my arms. "That's exactly what I'm doing." Jessica let out a harsh laugh. "Wow, you really think you're the victim here, don't you?" I stared at her, unblinking. "Aren't I?" she huffed, shaking her head. "You know, you're not perfect either." I arched a brow. "Oh?" And what exactly have I done, Jessica? Enlighten me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing. I grabbed my keys from the dresser and walked to the door. Get your things. I'll wait in the living room. Jessica stood there, motionless, staring at me like she couldn't believe this was actually happening. Then finally she moved. She stomped past me, muttering under her breath, grabbing her bag from the hallway. I followed her to the front door, watching as she threw it open. She turned back one last time, her expression unreadable. You're making a mistake, she said. I met her gaze. No, you did. Then I closed the door behind her. The house was silent. For the first time in years, I was completely alone. No sound of Jessica moving around in the kitchen. No footsteps in the hallway. No forced laughter or fake smiles. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the clock. I stood in the entryway, staring at the door. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was steady. But inside, something felt off. Not wrong. Not painful. Just off. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Sometimes, in my darkest thoughts, I pictured a screaming match. Jessica throwing things, me shouting accusations, neighbors peeking through their windows. Other times, I imagined her breaking down in tears, apologizing, begging me to forgive her. But the reality, she hadn't begged. She hadn't cried. She had fought, argued, deflected, blamed me, acted like I was overreacting. And then, when she realized she had lost, she just left. No remorse, no regret, just an inconvenience she had to deal with before moving on to the next chapter of her life. And yet, the weight in my chest wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder, something sharper. I turned away from the door and walked into the kitchen. The counter was cluttered. Her coffee mug from yesterday, a pile of unopened mail, a pen she always left uncapped. I reached out and knocked the mug into the sink with the back of my hand. It clattered against the metal, rolling once before coming to a stop. A deep breath, then another. I needed air. Grabbing my jacket, I stepped outside onto the porch. The night was cool, the kind of crisp autumn air that hinted at the first real chill of the season. Jessica's car was gone. The black sedan that had belonged to her boyfriend was also gone. Good. For a few minutes, I just stood there, staring at the empty driveway. The same driveway where she had frozen in shock just an hour ago. Where everything had unraveled. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated. She had been exposed. She had been caught. And yet, there was no real sense of victory. Just a strange, hollow feeling. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Jessica, you're really doing this? I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then, without replying, I locked the phone and slid it back into my pocket. She didn't deserve an answer. I sat down on the porch steps, running a hand through my hair. The weight of everything started settling in now. The past few hours had been a whirlwind of tension, confrontation, and adrenaline. But now I had to deal with what came next. I had spent years building a life with someone who, in the end, didn't even flinch when it all fell apart. How long had she been doing this? How many lies had she told me? Had she ever really loved me, or had I just been a placeholder? A comfortable, stable option until something more exciting came along? I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers against my temple. This wasn't the time to spiral. There were things to do, a lawyer to call, finances to sort out, Jessica's things to pack. But first I needed sleep. I stood up, walked back inside, and locked the door behind me. The house was still silent, still empty, and for the first time, I was okay with that. I woke up to sunlight bleeding through the blinds, cutting across the empty side of the bed. Jessica's side. The sheets were still pulled back from where she had last slept, like an imprint of her presence even though she wasn't here anymore. For a moment, I just stared at it. It was strange how quickly things changed. How one night could flip your entire life upside down. Yesterday morning, I was just another husband with a wife who was away for work. And now I was a man who had kicked his cheating wife out of the house. I exhaled, dragging a hand down my face before swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My body ached not from physical exertion, but from the sheer weight of everything. The house was too quiet, No sound of the shower running. No scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen. No Jessica moving around, humming some song under her breath. Good. I pushed myself up and walked into the bathroom, splashing cold water onto my face. When I looked into the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the man staring back at me. There was no sadness in his eyes, no heartbreak, just exhaustion. I grabbed my phone off the counter and checked my messages. Jessica, 3:12 a.m. This isn't over. Jessica, 4:27 a.m. I deserve better than this childish silent treatment. Jessica, 6:51 a.m. Fine. Be a coward. I'll be by later to get my things. I let out a humorless chuckle. Coward? That was rich, coming from her. She thought she still had control, that she could manipulate the situation, twist things around to make me feel guilty. Not this time. I scrolled down to my last conversation with her sister, Laura. She'll need a place to stay tonight. I'm done. Laura, wait. Are you serious? What happened? You already know. Laura never responded after that, which told me everything I needed to know. Jessica's own family knew what she was doing, and no one said a damn thing. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the counter. Jessica was coming back today. I wasn't going to give her the chance to make this easy for herself. I walked into the guest bedroom, grabbed an empty suitcase from the closet, and started packing. Not my things, hers. Every item of clothing, every shoe, every stupid, overpriced bottle of perfume she swore she needed. It all went into the suitcase. I didn't fold anything. I didn't care. She didn't deserve that kind of effort. When I reached the nightstand, I paused. Our wedding photo was still there. It was a simple picture. Jessica in her white dress, beaming at the camera, me standing beside her, looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. I picked up the frame. For a second, just a second, something deep in my chest tightened. Then I turned the frame over, popped off the back, and slid the photo out. I ripped it in half. Jessica's smiling face separated from mine. A clean break down the middle. I tossed both halves into the suitcase, zipped it shut, and dragged it to the front door. Let her take back whatever scraps of this life she thought were worth keeping, that I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 2:04 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway, Jessica's. I had been sitting in the living room, waiting, sipping on coffee that had long since gone cold. I didn't get up right away. I let her sit out there for a moment, probably fixing her hair in the mirror, adjusting whatever fake expression she planned to use when she walked inside. Then, finally, the car door opened. The sound of her heels against the pavement made my jaw tighten. She had always worn them when she wanted to feel in control, like clicking them against the floor somehow made her the most important person in the room. Not today. A knock. Sharp. Purposeful. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. Jessica stood there in oversized sunglasses, her lips pressed together, an expensive-looking purse slung over her shoulder. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was here for a casual visit, not to collect her things after being caught cheating. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're late." She took off her sunglasses, tucking them into her purse. "I didn't realize we were on a schedule." "We are." I gestured behind me. "Your things are packed. Suitcase is by the door." Jessica's gaze flickered past me, landing on the single suitcase I had left for her. Something flashed in her eyes. Just one. She knew what that meant. Her clothes, her shoes, the little luxuries she had scattered throughout the house, all packed up in one single unceremonious bag. Everything else? Mine. She let out a slow breath. "You really went through my things?" I shrugged. "Figured I'd save you the trouble." Jessica stepped past me, into the house, her gaze sweeping over the space like she expected something to be different, like she was looking for proof that she still belonged here. But there was nothing. No trace of her. No lingering scent of her perfume. No framed photos of us smiling together. I had erased her. Jessica turned back to me, her jaw tight. "You didn't have to be so cruel about this." I let out a short laugh. "Cruel?" She set her purse down on the counter, crossing her arms. "I made a mistake, okay? But what you're doing, throwing me out like some piece of garbage. You're acting like I never mattered to you." I stared at her for a long moment, and then I said it. The one thing I knew would cut deeper than anything else. "You didn't." Jessica flinched, just barely. Her fingers twitched, gripping her arms a little tighter, like she wasn't sure whether to lash out or walk away. Then she scoffed, rolling her eyes. Right? Because you're perfect, aren't you? I didn't answer. She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. You really think you're coming out of this as the good guy, don't you? I arched a brow. You think there's a good guy in this situation? Jessica grabbed the suitcase, yanking it toward her. You know what? Fine. You want me gone? I'm gone. She slung her purse back over her shoulder, then turned toward the door. But before she stepped out, she hesitated. Then, without looking back, she said it. You'll regret this. I let out a slow breath. Then, quietly, calmly, I responded. No, I won't. And then I closed the door. The second the door shut behind her, a strange quiet settled over the house. Not peaceful, not comforting, just empty. Jessica was gone. For real this time. No more waiting for the inevitable argument. No more bracing for her next excuse, her next lie, her next business trip. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, listening. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she walked to her car. The trunk popped open, a thud as the suitcase hit the inside. Then the car door slammed shut. The engine started. And then, just like that, she was gone. I let out a slow breath. It should have felt like relief, like some massive weight lifting off my shoulders. But instead, it felt more like standing in the aftermath of a storm, staring at the wreckage, knowing that, yeah, the worst is over, but now I had to clean it up. I ran a hand through my hair and turned back to the living room. The space where she had stood just minutes ago felt like a crime scene. The coffee table still had the faint ring from where she always set her wine glass. The couch cushions were still slightly indented from the way she liked to sit. I needed to get out of here. Grabbing my keys, I left. I drove with no real destination, just turning at random, letting the motion of the car distract me. The streets blurred past, familiar but distant, like I was seeing them from the outside of my own life. At some point, I ended up at a small diner on the edge of town. One of those places that smelled like burnt coffee and syrup, where the same 5 people probably sat at the counter every morning without fail. I slid into a booth, ordered a black coffee, and stared out the window. Then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check. Laura, hey, can we talk? Jessica's sister. I frowned, staring at the screen. I hadn't spoken to Laura much outside of family events. But if she was reaching out now, it wasn't for nothing. I sighed and typed back. Me, what's up? A few seconds passed. Then, Laura, are you free right now? I think you need to hear this. My stomach twisted. I hesitated. Then finally, me, yeah, where are you? 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Laura at a different cafe, watching as she stirred her tea, not meeting my eyes. She looked uncomfortable. Finally, she exhaled and set her spoon down. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, she started, her voice quiet. And I don't blame you, but I couldn't just keep my mouth shut anymore. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Go on. Laura hesitated. Then, finally, she looked up at me. She's been lying to you for a long time. My jaw tightened. I figured. No, Laura said quickly, shaking her head. Not just about the cheating. About everything. I stared at her, waiting. Then she dropped the bomb. She never went on any business trips. A pause. The world seemed to slow. I blinked. What? Laura's expression was pained, like she had been holding onto this for too long. Jessica doesn't travel for work. She never has. Every time she told you she was out of town, she wasn't. She was right here in the city. My fingers curled into fists. You knew. Laura swallowed hard. Not at first. But when I found out, she made me promise not to say anything. She told me it wasn't a big deal. That you'd freak out over nothing. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Right? Because lying about your entire job is nothing. She wanted freedom, Laura admitted. She wanted you to trust her without actually having to be honest. And I think she liked having power over you, knowing she could do whatever she wanted, and you'd never question it. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table. Jessica hadn't just cheated. She had built an entire fake reality for me to live in, and I had believed it. I looked back at Laura, my voice eerily calm. Anything else? She hesitated. Then, yes. My stomach sank. She's not done, you know, Laura said, looking genuinely worried now. Jessica, she doesn't lose. Ever. She's going to come back. And when she does, she leaned forward, lowering her voice. She's going to make your life a living hell. Laura's words sat heavy between us. She's going to make your life a living hell. I stared at her, trying to gauge if this was just an exaggeration or if she truly believed it. Judging by the way she was gripping her teacup, knuckles white, jaw tight, she wasn't just saying it for effect. Jessica wasn't done. I let out a slow breath, my fingers tapping against the table. What do you mean by that? Laura sighed, glancing around as if someone might be listening. Then she leaned in, voice lower. She doesn't lose. Not like this. And especially not in a way that makes her look bad. She's probably already thinking of ways to spin this, to make it seem like you're the problem. I scoffed. She cheated. She lied for months. What possible excuse could she come up with? Laura gave me a knowing look. You think the truth matters to Jessica? She doesn't need facts. She needs a story. And trust me, she's good at making one up. Something cold crept up my spine. Because I knew Laura was right. I had seen Jessica twist things before. At work, with friends, even with her own family. She had this ability to rewrite situations in a way that made her look like the victim. And people always believed her. I leaned forward. So what do you think she's gonna do? Laura hesitated. Then she pulled out her phone and started scrolling. She called me this morning, she said, her expression darkening. Ranting about how unfair you were being. How you just threw her out like trash. She sounded different. Different how? Not sad. Not regretful. Angry. Laura's eyes met mine. Like she was planning something. She found what she was looking for and turned her phone toward me. It was a text from Jessica. Jessica, he's going to regret this. If he wants to act like the victim, fine. Let's see how much he likes it when everyone else sees him the way I do. A slow burn started in my chest. I had expected her to be mad. To try and manipulate her way back in. Maybe even beg. But this? She was coming for me. I exhaled sharply, dragging a hand down my face. So what? She's gonna spread lies about me? Make herself look like the wounded wife? Laura nodded. Probably. And if that doesn't work, she'll escalate. I frowned. Escalate how? Laura bit her lip, hesitating. Then, after a moment, she shook her head. I don't know. But I do know that she's already laying the groundwork. My grip tightened on the edge of the table. Jessica wasn't just mad I caught her. She was mad that I had taken control. She had spent months, maybe years, keeping me in the dark. Now, in less than 24 hours, I had shattered the entire illusion she had built. I had beaten her at her own game, and Jessica didn't lose. Laura sighed. Look, I don't know how bad this is going to get, but you need to be careful. She's unpredictable when she feels backed into a corner. I exhaled through my nose, my mind racing. I had already kicked her out. But that wasn't enough. Not if she was planning something. I needed to protect myself. I needed to get ahead of her before she had the chance to twist this into something it wasn't. I pulled out my phone and started typing. Laura frowned. What are you doing? I glanced up at her. Making sure Jessica never steps foot in my house again. By the time I got back home, I had a plan. Jessica thought she could control the narrative, but she underestimated me. She had spent our entire marriage manipulating people, twisting reality to fit whatever story suited her best. But this time, she had no leverage, no power, and I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her next move. I walked inside, locked the door behind me, and went straight to my laptop. If she was going to start spreading lies, I needed to cover my bases. First, I typed out a detailed timeline of everything: dates, events, receipts. I backed up the hotel video, screenshotted her texts, gathered every piece of evidence that proved what she had done. Then I called my lawyer. I didn't even hesitate. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him in his office, laying everything out. He listened, nodding occasionally, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he set his pen down and leaned back in his chair. This could go one of two ways, he said. Either she accepts the divorce and moves on, or she tries to make things difficult. I scoffed. She's already trying. He nodded. Then we hit first. I arched a brow. We file immediately. We document everything. We make sure there's a clear legal record of her behavior. That way, if she tries to make any false claims, we have proof that she's acting out of spite. I exhaled slowly. And if she tries to come back to the house? He slid a paper toward me. We file for exclusive use of the property. Given that you own it and she's already moved out, we have a strong case. I grabbed the pen without hesitation. If Jessica wanted a war, I'd give her one. That night, I sat in my now silent house, staring at my phone. No new messages. No calls. But that didn't mean she had given up. Jessica wasn't the type to just accept things. No, she was probably working on something right now, weaving together whatever twisted version of the truth suited her best. But I was ready. She thought I would just roll over, that I would let guilt or nostalgia or love make me weak. She was wrong. I put my phone down, leaned back against the couch, and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared of what Jessica might do. I was just waiting for her to make her next move that I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was buzzing nonstop, calls, texts, notifications. At first, I thought maybe something had happened to Jessica. Maybe she had finally realized she couldn't win and was reaching out for one last desperate attempt at reconciliation. But then I unlocked my phone, and I saw exactly what she had done. A long, dramatic post on social media, filled with half-truths and outright lies. Jessica Reynolds' public post. I never thought I'd have to share something so personal, but I can't stay silent anymore. The person I trusted the most, the man I gave everything to, has turned into someone I don't even recognize. After years of emotional neglect and constant suspicion, I made a mistake. I'm not perfect, but instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix what was broken, he threw me out like I was nothing. He made me feel worthless. And now he's trying to destroy my life just to make himself look like the victim. I know I'm not the only one who's been in a toxic relationship. I know what it's like to feel trapped, to be made to feel like you're the bad guy when all you ever did was try. If you've ever been in a situation like this, know that you're not alone. We don't deserve to be treated like we're disposable. To my friends and family, thank you for standing by me. To those who truly know me, you know the truth. I stared at the screen, my blood boiling. The comments were already flooded with sympathy. I'm so sorry you're going through this. You deserve so much better. He always seemed controlling TBH. You dodged a bullet. Stay strong, girl. We love you. And then there was the worst one. Don't let him get away with this. He needs to pay for what he did to you. My grip on the phone tightened. This was exactly what Laura had warned me about. Jessica wasn't trying to fix anything. She wasn't trying to apologize. She was trying to bury me. She had flipped the script so perfectly, so effortlessly, that people were already taking her side without even knowing the full story. And that wasn't even the worst part. Because just as I was about to put my phone down, another message came in. From my boss. Hey, we need to talk. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Jessica wasn't just coming for my reputation. She was coming for my life. I didn't waste a second. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to the office. The entire way there, my mind raced. Jessica was dangerous when she was angry. But this was calculated. She hadn't just thrown out some emotional rant. She had targeted me directly, knowing exactly where to hit me. My job, my reputation, my future. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The moment I stepped into the office, I felt it. The shift. The way people glanced at me, then quickly looked away. The whispers. The tension. Jessica had done exactly what she set out to do. When I reached my boss's office, the door was already open. He was sitting behind his desk, phone in hand, scrolling. My stomach twisted. I didn't even have to ask what he was looking at. Cleared my throat. You wanted to see me? He looked up, setting the phone down. Yeah. Closed the door. I did. Then I sat across from him, waiting. For a long moment he just studied me. Then he sighed. Look, I'm not going to pretend to understand what's going on in your personal life. But this is a problem. I exhaled sharply. You think I did what she's claiming? He shook his head. I don't know what to think. And that's the issue. Right now, you've got people in the company talking. Some of our clients have even seen the post. I clenched my jaw. So what? You're firing me? He hesitated. Then, not yet. Not yet. But I need you to handle this, he continued. Because if it gets worse, if it starts affecting business, I might not have a choice. I nodded once. I had expected this. Jessica was playing the long game. She wasn't trying to get immediate revenge. She was trying to ruin me piece by piece. I wasn't going to let that happen. I stood up. I'll take care of it. My boss gave me a long look, then nodded. I hope so. When I got back to my car, I didn't drive home. I pulled out my phone and called Laura. She answered immediately. I saw the post, she said, skipping the pleasantries. I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, she really outdid herself this time. Laura sighed. What are you gonna do? I looked out the windshield, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. End it. Completely. Silence. Then, how? I'm fighting back. The next morning, I made my move. I didn't respond to Jessica's post directly. That's what she wanted. She wanted me to get defensive, to start arguing online so she could twist things even more. Instead, I went straight for the truth. I called my lawyer and had him draft an official cease and desist letter, demanding she take the post down and stop spreading false information. Then I made sure every legal document was in order for the divorce, full control of the house, financial separation, 0 claims to my assets. But the real checkmate, I sent everything, the hotel receipts, the texts, the video, to the people who mattered. Not to the internet. Not to some messy public forum where Jessica could manipulate things further. I sent it to her family, her close friends, the people who had been commenting on her post, blindly defending her. No words, no explanations, just proof. And then, I waited. It didn't take long. By the afternoon, Jessica's post was gone. The comments had turned. People were asking questions. Her friends were going silent. And then, finally, her name appeared on my phone. Incoming call. I let it ring. She called again. And again. Then a text. Jessica, you had no right to do that. I smirked. Me neither did you. Jessica, you're gonna regret this. I exhaled slowly, then typed out my final message. Me no, Jessica. For the first time in a long time, I won't. Then I blocked her number. For good. And just like that, Jessica was finally out of my life.